Leader of Islamic movement in Nigeria, Ibrahim El-Zakzaky, returns to Nigeria. Federal government promises due diligence on his case. Nigerian army redeploys generals, appoints new commander to combat Boko Haram. In international news, Israel now grants entry visa to one of two U.S. congresswomen it had barred on Thursday. And in sport, 20,000 runners from across the world to participate in Onitsha International Marathon.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Leader of Islamic movement in Nigeria, Ibrahim El-Zakzaky, has returned to Nigeria after spending 3 days on a medical trip in India. Spokesman of the movement, Ibrahim Musa, accused the federal government of frustrating the treatment of the IMN leader. Musa says the federal government's interference in the process rather than supervision is a reason for the IMN leader's decision to return home. El-Zakzaky said in an audio tape he wants access to his preferred doctors because he does not trust those they asked to examine him. But the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Information, Grace Gekpa, has accused him of not complying with the terms of Kaduna High Court's bail order. Gekpa says El-Zakzaky was demanding for his passport, a 5-star hotel, and free movement. While the federal government says due diligence will be followed in dealing with his case, the government says El-Zakzaky and his wife had broken the terms under which they left Nigeria for treatment in India. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, has seized the international and diplomatic passports of the head of the Civil Service of the Federation, Winifred Oyoita. The embattled head of service is under investigation for alleged 3 billion naira fraud. Oyoita has been barred from traveling outside the country pending the conclusion of investigation. The EFCC is also inviting 3 permanent secretaries and some directors of procurement for interaction over some contract awarded to firms with links to the head of service. EFCC says accounts of affected companies have been placed under watch till they are found to be clear of any infraction. Oyoita has denied all allegations. The Nigerian Army has reshuffled again in the postings of army commanders in the fight against insurgency. The postings took effect on Wednesday. Top officers affected in the latest exercise include Bulama Biu, a major general and commander of the Boko Haram war. He is replaced by Brigadier General A.K. Ibrahim. Biu has now been transferred to Sector 3 Operation Lafia Dole and Sector 3 Multinational Joint Task Force as acting commander for both units. Enugu State government has sacked 10 secondary school teachers and suspended at least 200 others for alleged misconduct, especially absenteeism. 500 other teachers would have their salaries seized as a disciplinary measure to make the system functional. Chairman, Post-Primary School Management Board, Nectar Ezema, disclosed to State Assembly Committee members that the present administration is out to clean the rot in the educational sector. Ezema says the board is saddled with the responsibility of supervising schools, discipline of teachers and students, and payment of their salaries. Ezema says it is sad that many teachers developed phobia for classroom and were supported by principals. A university professor is urging the federal government to give startups a 5-year tax holiday to enable them to survive. Director, Entrepreneurship and Skills Development Center at the University of Lagos, Professor Sunday Adebisi, made the suggestion on Thursday while presenting a paper on solutions to the unemployment rate in Nigeria during the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry's annual Entrepreneurship Summit. Professor Adebisi says this initiative would help startup businesses grow and survive. Adebisi says this would also help curb the high rate of unemployment in the country. The Lagos State government has taken a step to tackle sexual abuse and domestic violence in the state. It has set up an emergency number *6820# for parents and school owners to report cases of such abuse. Lagos State's Ministry of Education, Director General of Quality Assurance, Ronke Shoyombo, says the department will attend to calls within 24 hours to rescue victims. Shoyombo advises private school owners to adopt the Lagos State government's template on Child Protection and Safeguarding Policy 2016. The Director General emphasized that the safeguarding policy is to protect children against domestic and sexual violence.
Coming up, African stories. Zimbabwe main opposition party scraps demonstrations after court upholds police ban. And to later, international news. Israel grants entry visa to U.S. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib on humanitarian grounds.
You are watching ANN.
Dear Mommy, you went out that night with the baby in your tummy, but you did not come back. The baby is very fine and she eats and sleeps a lot. Everyone says that you are in a better place, but I miss you so much. I keep asking them, where is the better place, but nobody answers me. Auntie Kemi just hugs me and says go and play. Mommy, I miss you. Please, when are you coming home?
I still do miss you, Mom. And in honor of your memory, I'm a doctor today working with the MTN Foundation to save mothers and children every day.
Ending mother and child mortality in Nigeria is dear to us. We will keep strengthening this most important bond just for you.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to African stories. Zimbabwe's High Court has upheld the police ban on a planned opposition protest in the capital, Harare. Reporters in the capital say a large number of police officers has been deployed in the city center. Police warned that the protests are likely to be violent and advised people to stay away. State-run broadcaster reports the main opposition party, Movement for Democratic Change, says it has decided not to press ahead with its plans. The party had called for the mass demonstrations on Friday to highlight people suffering amid worsening economic conditions. Human rights groups say 6 anti-government activists have been seized and tortured this week in Zimbabwe ahead of the planned protest. President Emmerson Mnangagwa has called on the opposition to dialogue with the government. A regional official in Tanzania says the death toll has risen to 85 in a fuel tanker explosion last weekend in the eastern part of the country. Government officials initially reported 60 deaths on Saturday as the tanker burst into flames while crowds gathered to siphon petrol from it in Morogoro, 125 miles west of the commercial capital, Dar es Salaam. Morogoro Regional Commissioner Stephen Kebwe says accident victims with burn injuries have been admitted at the regional hospital. Meanwhile, more than 20 other survivors are said to be receiving medical attention at the country's biggest referral hospital in Dar es Salaam. Officials say some relatives had to use DNA tests to identify bodies burned beyond recognition. Uganda has been struggling to contain a malaria outbreak that has plagued more than 1 million citizens in the past 2 months. Now, Hilary Ayasiga reports the government says there is a significant increase in numbers of those affected.
Battling bouts of malaria, Derek Mayengo is among many patients here fighting the disease. A recent survey by Uganda's health ministry shows that malaria cases are up by 40%.
When I came in, one, as the heat was too much, two, a bit of joint pains, and then too much headache.
Children under the age of 5 are most vulnerable. Symptoms include high fever, nausea, vomiting, and headache, among others. This health facility receives on average 10 patients every day with symptoms of malaria. And after treatment, health workers here are encouraging them to use preventive methods such as sleeping under a mosquito net. Health officials say a general decline in the use of mosquito nets is just one reason for the increased numbers of people with malaria. Population growth and prolonged rains also help fuel the spread of the disease. The rains provide breeding ground for the mosquitoes that transmit the disease from one person to another.
The number of cases of malaria have increased by over 400,000 this year when compared with last year, from about 1 million cases in June 2018 to 1.4 million in June 2019.
Ugandan scientists plan to breed genetically modified mosquitoes as part of a plan to fight malaria in Africa. But that's a long-term solution. And for now, the health ministry says anti-malaria drugs, use of mosquito nets, and indoor spraying are the best available weapons to keep the killer disease at bay.
The South Sudanese government says it plans to increase oil output by the end of this year in an effort to put more crude oil on the market as they seek more buyers. Reporter Patrick Oyet has more.
For years, this field was closed due to insecurity, but now the Manga oil field has resumed production in these areas. That has given South Sudan a much-needed boost for its economy, which is heavily dependent on oil. More than 98% of the country's budget comes from the resource.
We know that South Sudan has a lot of opportunities that are still yet to be developed, especially in regards to energy security, and energy security is key, and it is number one. For us to talk about energy security, we talk about refining. When we talk about refining, it means that we can develop other sectors using fuel directly.
The government hopes to further increase production, setting a target of 200,000 barrels a day by the end of this year.
South Sudan's government hopes by increasing oil production, it will be able to raise money that would be required for the implementation of the peace deal.
Security has improved in South Sudan since the agreement was signed. Experts say if peace holds, the economy could get back on track.
We believe with the production of oil, which is currently ongoing, the exchange rate is going to stabilize. And since oil is the only product that is contributing hugely into the GDP of this country, the resumption of oil production will actually stabilize the economy and we'll see exchange rates coming down.
The government says it is now ready for international investment.
South Sudan is becoming more secure, and the peace implementation also is in progress, which will help us also to attract more investors to South Sudan, whether in the upstream or in the downstream. And as we do that, our banking system, our financial system will also improve as we attract a lot of investors on an equal basis.
The country's civil war, which began in 2013, led to a sharp decline in oil production. By 2014, South Sudan was producing fewer than 130,000 barrels per day. That led to soaring inflation and economic stagnation. So, as the country continues to recover from years of turmoil, the reopening of oil fields is bringing renewed hope.
When we return, international news. Israel grants entry visa to U.S. Congresswomen on humanitarian grounds. And later, sports. 20,000 runners gear up for Niger International Marathon.
You are watching ANN.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In international stories, Israel's Interior Ministry says it will not allow U.S. lawmaker Rashida Tlaib to visit her family in the occupied West Bank on humanitarian grounds. The country had earlier bowed to U.S. President Donald Trump's pressure to bar the Congresswoman and her colleague Ilhan Omar from making an official trip there. Both Congresswomen are Democrats. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a close Trump ally, had said on Thursday he would not allow the two women to his country after Trump urged him to bar them. Tlaib and Omar had voiced support for the pro-Palestinian boycott, divestment, sanctions movement over Israel's policy toward Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. Israeli law provides for denial of entry to supporters of the movement. Netanyahu said if Tlaib would write a letter for permission to see relatives on humanitarian grounds, he would consider it. She sent the letter on Thursday asking permission to visit her relatives, especially her 90-year-old grandmother. She said this may be her last opportunity to see her. But she later reversed her decision, saying in a tweet that going on the trip under the conditions spelled out by Israel would amount to being silenced and treated like a criminal, and that visiting her grandmother under the conditions she described as oppressive stands against everything she believes in, fighting against racism, oppression, and injustice. The chaos and violence of the Hong Kong protests have subsided for now, and all has returned to normal at the airports there. On Thursday, protesters apologized to travelers about their conduct. The demonstrations were reined in by police after a court injunction. All seems to be well at the airports, as we see in this report.
Residents have staged more activities in support of the police following protest violence in the Hong Kong International Airport. Participants started an online campaign to call for an end to the violence and for punishment of criminals.
They're simply beating people who have different views. Is that what they call democracy? Blocking ways at airports and subways, preventing people from going home. Is that their freedom?
There has been too much going on in Hong Kong. We don't want to just stand by and watch. We, among many others, stand against violence. We support the police.
Their demands have made newspaper headlines. One local paper ran a front-page article with a headline saying, "Hong Kong has had enough." The Chinese Foreign Ministry's Commissioner Office in Hong Kong has once again refuted U.S. politicians' recent rhetoric regarding Hong Kong, accusing them of distorting facts and encouraging crimes. Operations at the Hong Kong airport have been seriously impaired in the past several days. At least 300 flights were cancelled on Tuesday due to an occupation by demonstrators. And that was followed by assaults on a tourist, a reporter, and police. Airport operations returned to normal on Thursday. Hong Kong police say over 700 people have been arrested since a series of protests began in June. They gave this update during a news conference on Thursday.
Here the police reiterates, anyone who commits violence and jeopardizes the airport or the people at the airport could face a severe punishment of life imprisonment. Anyone who illegally and intentionally obstructs or interferes with normal operations of the airport could violate the injunction issued by the court and be held liable for contempt of court. We hope that protesters won't challenge the law.
Gibraltar has released from detention Iranian supertanker Grace 1 after Iran assured the British overseas territory it would not send its crude oil cargo to Syria. The court's order for the tanker's release came after the United States launched a new last-minute legal bid to hold it. Reuters news agency quotes Iran as saying the ship will be reflagged and renamed. Iran says the ship will sail as soon as it can be refilled and ready. The Grace 1 had been carrying 2 million barrels of oil when Gibraltar police and British special forces seized it. It was one of a series of recent incidents in which Western nations and Iran targeted each other in the Persian Gulf and its other ports in the Middle East. Tehran has condemned Thursday's efforts by the U.S. to block the release of the ship. We'll take a break. I'll be back with sports. Please stay with us.
Up next, sports. 20,000 runners from around the world to participate in Onitsha International Marathon. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit. We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow the story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In sports, the Nigerian national women's basketball team, the Tigers, have qualified for the semi-final stage of the 2019 FIBA Women's Afro-Basket in Senegal after beating DR Congo 79-74 on Thursday. The Tigers, who had blown Tunisia and Cameroon in their earlier group game, started the first quarter on a slow note, with DR Congo getting the first basket of the quarter, commanding the tempo of the game. Defending champions, the Tigers will face either Mali or Ivory Coast in the semi-finals. Anambra State will host the first international marathon in southeastern parts of Nigeria. More than 20,000 runners from around the world are expected to take part in the race, which coincides with the popular Ofala Festival. Head of Marketing and Branding of the Onitsha City Marathon, Chisom Okereke Ekwe, says the race will take place in October. It says registration is free for anyone capable and ready. We look forward to that. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a great weekend.